Now, next up, we've got a panel session on strategies to translate marketing concepts to different cultures. Did your previously successful campaigns not resonate with new tangible target audience? This panel is going to talk about the importance of understanding and addressing cultural nuances as a marketer while still following the basic principles. And to moderate this panel, we have Eveline Anastasia. She is a co-founder and CEO of Grow in Asia Creative Consulting. If you'd like to come up and moderate this panel. And joining her, we have Samina Chowdhury, top agent partner and luxury home marketing agent, Keller Williams Lucido Agency. We have Her Highness Tankia Jadeeyah Abang, CEO and Managing Director of Twins Ram Media Group. And we have Ashmita, who is staying on the stage with us as well. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you haven't had your third cup of coffee today. But if you already have, maybe some of you still sleepy, you can go for your fourth cup of coffee, even if that's not healthy at all. So let's just get started. For today's session, we will discuss about the strategies to translate marketing concepts to different cultures. Quite heavy in the afternoon, but I have the best team here as a panel. That will share their way of crafting a campaign that actually relevant to the consumer in each market, because we believe we are coming from a different background. Maybe I will share first, Samina. You can do a little bit introduction with a little bit touch of sharing of your hobbies, maybe just to make sure the audience are alive.
Hear me? Yeah. So, strategy wise, I would say think about the clientele that you are most comfortable working with. And for me, it was people from my subcontinent, you know, and targeting them with my authentic self, being who I am. And nobody understands the clientele that I target, which is from my subcontinent. Nobody understands better than me, especially living in the US. An American will not understand the culture and community like I will, because I grew up in that culture and community. So the strategy should be that what is the target market clientele that you're most comfortable working with, and where you can show your authentic self.
All right. For me, I think we've had a long discussion earlier, but coming across from a background where I did my media management from Scotland, where I think with diversity coming in also comes across a good hold on the research that we really need to have across while creating a strategy for any clientele that we come across. So I think the right strategy, connecting to people with their kind of culture, as Samina just mentioned, connecting with the culture, connecting with their emotions, and the right mix of both of them would give the right strategy to go on and head on to a great brand presence overall.
Before moving to there, I think I will throw away some questions to the audience first. Before moving along for about the strategies and so on, maybe I will ask for some marketers here. Who those among you have creates a campaign that is culturally fit, localized, and then contextual? Maybe you can raise your hand. I have one in the back. I have two. I have three. And then is there any other more? Maybe some global campaigns to local campaigns. Thank you. So I believe there's some challenges, right, in crafting those kind of localized contextual content, because you need to strategize what's what to talk, what's to address, who are your audience, and that kind of things. So I see that Samina Asmita is coming from different background. The first one is from US market, for sure, and then for Asian market, And then I believe here Dia is also for Asian and Euro market.
Hello. Hi everyone. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I feel like everybody's so tired. I'm just gonna introduce myself again. I'm not sure if you're tired of seeing my face on the stage. My name is Jadeeyah, and I am the global marketing strategy consultant for Samsung Electromechanics or Solum, and at the same time the CEO of Twin Rams Media. Based on my experience, this is currently one of the pivotal challenges that we have at this point in our marketing campaigns is that initially our point of language in Samsung Electromechanics, with my client, is English. And with that, we had to translate all of our marketing materials, right? Especially if you're still in this sense and where we're coming from, the company I represent. We're still trying to enter different markets. Samsung in general is very known as a brand, but the subsidiary of it is, still trying to break down that barrier. We have local competition, we have existing global conglomerates as well on our backs that is trying to enter the similar market and provide the same set of products. So one of the challenges, as I've mentioned, is localization, transcreation, and whatnot. I could say this just coming from the perspective of B2B, B2C. If you're starting up, the easiest way to go is translation, direct translation, right? If you're running an e-commerce store, chances are you can install a plugin and then it would allow you to translate the content that you have written initially for whatever language that is to the subsequent language you want to target. In this sense, however, we're beyond past that. When you manage like B2B conglomerates or international conglomerates in general, just a bigger scope, one of the very important factors is to actually already take a look at translation and transcreation as a separate department. To actually support your overall marketing initiative. Chances are you're not just translating overall like digital marketing content, but also like leaflets, actual printed products that just translate beyond digital marketing, but also includes traditional marketing as well. In addition, a lot of these marketing materials are actually used to support sales in those regions. So having the consistency or to actually implement some sort of a framework for all of the markets to actually have a unified message still at the end of the day it's primarily the very difficult job. And on top of that, in addition, is to allow your branding to translate visually as well to different cultures or subcultures there are. So this is some of the things that I handle on a day-to-day basis, and I can tell you already when you're trying to like work with clients on that scale, it's already very important to include them, especially in terms of content strategy. Work with them directly and have a special point of contact between sales, who's actually the one who's going to be using those marketing materials directly, right? Especially if you're in B2B. You have to have consistent dialogue with the sales managers, sales department, and business development, and also put that input, whatever they have, into your actual collaterals and in translation, transcreating.
That's interesting. We already learned from Ashmita and Samina about what is strategy basically look like in some point of view, because I believe strategy is a heavy word. Not everyone has the same definition. And from Dia, we can see that culture can be translated into like different language, different content, different sets of visual, but still unified into one brand. That's what we call branding, right? I believe. Yeah, from maybe if I may add from my point of view, for example, Grow in Asia, my consulting team, it's actually have a campaign, a global cultural campaign that actually running. It's called and it's relevant with the World Cup campaign. So I have this brand called Mr. Potato. It's a snack competitor of Lay's, Pringles, and so on. They now have a brand ambassador, which is Neymar. From Brazil team, I call that a cultural campaign because they execute the campaign globally, but in Indonesia we have to like cultivate the message to be able to be understood by the audience in Indonesia. That's actually the cultural campaign. We try from global to local. So it's culture. Sometimes it's all about the language, all about the translation. But I believe culture is not only about that. Sometimes culture is also about the behavior of the people. And then I think the strategy itself is also a process, right? Do you guys agree with me? About the process on having one goal, maybe, and then how to get it and how to measure it. I think that's a strategy in my point of view. In that sense, I want us to share some progress in crafting and creating those kind of campaign message, campaign structure, localization. How do you understand your market? Especially like, for example, Samina have a niche market target
Yes.
audience, right? I
Yes.
remember you yesterday you shared about the feng shui and
Yeah.
real estate and thing. Maybe you can share with us how do you find out about that in your US market?
um, I I directly tap into the culture. When a buyer comes in for initial consultation, you have to hear them with their words and with their emotions. What they're saying with their words and what they're saying with their emotions. You have to be very attentive. Sometimes for them, it is very difficult to even get what they really want out in words. So asking more questions and digging deep, three deep into what they really want, and then getting it out. I'll give you an example. I had a client who was moving from LA to Baltimore. And what she told me was that she was working in Baltimore, and she had a very stressful work environment. And what she was looking for was a very quiet place to unwind after work, and she wanted to live in the city. Okay, this is what she told me. However, what I heard was she wants a quiet place. And when I look at city and quiet, they don't gel together. Okay, so I strategized. So my strategy was that I told her that, look, we're going to go see houses the next 3 days. The first day, I will show you houses in the city. I will point out the good and the bad of living in the city for you. The good would be that, yes, you work in the city, you live in the city. The bad is every nook and corner, there's a pub, and people are drinking, there's noise at night. Where is your quiet sanctuary that you want to come home to? Okay, so that was one. Then I told her that now let's time in the city how long it takes for you to go to work. So we have this app called Waze. It tells you during rush hour how long it takes to get to work. It came out to be about 20 minutes. Rush hour worst 25 minutes. Okay. Now the next day, I took her outside the city, a little bit outside the city, in the suburbs, where she did find the sense of refuel she needed in the neighborhood. Okay, so I showed her some properties there, again timed the commute. It came to about 30 minutes, so 5 minutes extra. Wouldn't you want that extra quiet feeling, the sense of refuel that you really want to and come home to unwind to? Okay, so this is the sense of strategy I gave her. She chose something in the suburbs, obviously, and she was very thankful that I took the extra care and understanding to see what she was not being able to tell me with her words, but I heard her with her emotions.
That's interesting.
So I think, as Samina rightly said, a person's behavior is something that is there to tap on. And along with what she just said, that, the demographics is something that we again need to consider. So having the right kind of mix for both, and giving it across to, how do we overpower that with the communication strategy that we need to kind of put across to the users, of course, needs to be dominated by the cultural background that they have, the emotions that we need to tap around. But I think it depends on the strategy that we kind of need to put across to the users. We have users which are empowered with a lot of research that they could do online for anything that they would want to connect on to. So tapping on the right strategy would be to have the person's behavior in mind, to consider the demographics that they are in, and to culturally align your communication according to that, I think.
And it differs from culture to culture, right? So what I see in most couples in America, for example, when they first come to me for their initial consultation, uh, I play a game with them. I give them two sets of paper, the husband and wife, okay? And I tell them that let's play a game. I want the husband to write the top 5 things that they want in their house, and I want the wife to write 5 things that is important to her. So both of them are writing top 5 things that is very important. Why I'm doing that is because I want to know what is important to both of them.
Anyway, similar? I don't really think so.
Then what I do is I then tell them exchange the paper. I want both of you to see what each other have written. And invariably, what is the answer I get? Oh, honey, I didn't know that this was so important to you. They
That's
don't
about
talk at
managing
home, but they
expectation.
want me to come and figure it out for them. And the reason I do this exercise is because I don't want to end up either making the husband happy or the wife happy. I need to make sure both are happy with the house.
I think that sentiment mixes up with every culture that we're sitting in,
Yeah.
and that's something that we can take home.
To take it to the larger industry or category on top of real estate, how about you, Tia?
It really varies. So on my end, coming from a conglomerate perspective, just representing the clients that I have, the first thing that whenever I speak to the obviously we have to translate the content, right? That's what the subject is all about. And what I do is first off very important to have a very good translation partner, right? Because ultimately, even if I speak Japanese and Arabic and Malay all together, I couldn't proofread, let's say, Chinese, or I couldn't proofread any other language outside the things that I know. So those are like very important element. First is like having a very good translation partner and quality assurance. If you can do that in house, then good. But ensure that you have a good mechanism to be able to proofread everything, because chances are also if that person is directly a native speaker, then it helps as well, because obviously the behavioral cultural stuff is going to be absorbed into the marketing collateral. So that's one. But if you are coming from the perspective that you are going to go through that process anyway to begin with, right, that you have to actually enter a global market, then you have to start with going global in mind. That's the first element, aside from having the translation partner, because having that perspective would enable you to figure out what would be your point of reference as a language. For instance, your point of reference to start with will say, if you're from Indonesia, it would be Indonesian going global. So what would be the metrics, or what would be the measurement of your translation of your brand itself, which is predominantly patterned toward Indonesian culture, right? To see that in a bigger perspective of that going global. So, and then from there you would understand, okay, this is the foundational framework of the brand, and then therefore this is how we're gonna see that brand being accepted or translated across cultures. So in Samsung, it was actually Korean. So Korean was the main pivotal language in the beginning of the company. Early on, I think in about 90s, it was like that, and then we had to transition from there to English. So English became the main cultural representation of what the Samsung brand is all about. Later down the line. So from there, we had to, after we figure out that that would be the point of reference, right, going global in mind, then it's a lot easier to have a global marketing strategy penned with different countries and as part of that. So for instance, like we have, let's say, our initial, we're launching currently some set of products for electric vehicles. So what's going to happen is that we have the English market, and that would be the point of reference. And then we would have South Korean, we have Arabic or EMEA, and then we have Asian, right? So it's gonna go boil down to, again, entering the market now, which is like obviously their behavior would come into play. Second is their what do you call it, like their culture would come into play, and then also their market demand, just the overall economics behind it. So that in itself, the grounding in itself is a lot easier, right? Especially also when you gather additional resources, as you have like translation agencies, transcreation materials, additional tools, which I can tell you guys later if you are interested. I can share that with you. And how that would be a lot easier for you to actually manage your digital campaigns through the transcreation process, and then also that of having a translation directory or translation what do you call it, like it's like a grammar book basically that you can find online and install it online. So that would be the point reference of all of your materials across all languages. So having the consistency also of words and all of that and the micro detail really helps as well. So that's where the translation management tool comes easy.
From maybe to add from my perspective, just to enrich what's the culture means. On top of translation words and content creation, I think, in my point of view, for someone who maybe some of you have been into to Indonesia, it's an island city where there are 5 big islands, and it's so different in each behavior of the cities. Forget about the words language, but the behavior is quite different. For example, if I said Java Island, they love sweet kind of food. And then if you go to Sumatra, like Aceh and so on, they love spicy food, more into like herbs. If you ever heard of rendang, things like that. So for example, if you are an agency or a consulting team that is executing some maybe ready to drink product, then you have to pair that with some kind of food that match the behavior of the island. So forget about the global campaign. Sometimes in Indonesia, it's very difficult to understand the local language as well.
So it's more of local and then getting that to the global level.
That's correct. That's correct. And then after all the discussion, I think we can agree that when you say strategies and culture, I think Samina mentioned a good thing, which we have to go directly into the market. We get to have our hands dirty. Some of us maybe are digital marketers, right? Sometimes we forget we only do the desk research. Type for this blog and then 5 things to know about the Indonesian people sometimes, or 5 things about the US market, things like that. But I see that when you get your hands dirty, typically,
Yes.
directly go into the market, and then you ask so many questions. I used to teach and train my team to ask at least 5 whys. So, for example, if you go meet a client, okay, what's your objective? I want to raise awareness. Why? Ask them until they get annoyed. So I think that happens the same with you guys,
Yes.
right?
And clients come with one focus in mind sometimes, but once you start asking them question based on that one focus they have, then they start to realize that their focus is completely wrong. And you have created a new focus for them. And the other thing is sometimes even we learn a lot from these clients, okay? For example, when we were talking about feng shui. So there's feng shui and then there's vastu. I learned feng shui is opposite of vastu. I didn't know this before, you know. I always thought feng shui and vastu is the same. And understanding feng shui and vastu allowed me to even understand certain neighborhoods, what kind of clientele to bring. I'll give you an example. There is a neighborhood near my house where there are these row of townhouses. You know, on one side, the townhouses are facing north, and on right across from it, there are townhouses which are facing south. I know for sure the south facing townhouses, all the people will be feng shui. North facing, they'll all be vastu. So targeting that kind of clientele, understanding what kind of clientele to bring to those houses, even with before bringing them, you know what they will like and what they will not like.
Sorry. I think as Samina rightly said, it's just not now, but I think ages back also, if I think most of us are aware of Unilever, which is a global company, it actually thought of the cultural and the local domain and, launched a subsidiary like an HLL, which was a Hindustan Liver Organization. And they launched shampoos worth rupees, I think, 1 INR, which is about 0.02 USD. And that became a rage. Why? Because they connected with the local audience. And connecting with them and their behavioral aspects did was a game changer at that point of time as well. So I think today we are just doing the same thing. We're trying to understand people behavior, we're trying to adapt as marketers into their culture, and kind of give across campaigns, whether we're doing it digitally or we're doing it personally. We're tapping on the market rightly. We're just kind of mixing up the local presence, their behavioral, and putting it demographically correctly is what we, as an individual, as brand marketers, are doing today.
I'd like to add, just going back on the concepts in itself, one of the challenges that I've, like this is a particular interesting talk because overall, right, like your one of the challenges that we have primarily is in English. Like a lot of the strategies to concept are normally penned in English, right? In a lot of like global companies. So the challenge now is like say you have a English website, an example, and you're trying to enter to a different market, but you wanted to make the same look and feel for the upcoming market that you're trying to enter. So there's few things automatically that you would consider. For instance, one is the domain extension of that country. The URL structure would be another, right? On the technical part of things. And then also in addition to that, actually the copy and the multilingual SEO. So I'm just trying to ground what we are talking about here because I feel like people would need to understand also the legwork that goes behind the scenes as to how you can make this concept translate into actual thing. And in actual reality is that when you enter the market, right, you've got the copy, right? For instance, you've outsourced that to a translation agency. You've got the visuals, right? You have your branding director, your art director, figure out the cultural nuances in the Japanese market or the Arabic market and whatnot. And then now, how do you execute it? This is the most difficult part. And this is where it's a make or break situation on our end. For instance, when we enter a market, having to have that recipe that I've told you guys and shared to you guys earlier. Before we even launch that, we would start already doing multilingual SEO, right? So we would be producing content that is just put in the back burner, but still published so that it's gonna push the organic traffic that we have alongside the actual like backlinking strategies that we do through like offsite SEO. So these are the technical elements. Even if let's say your primary language is still English, it should not necessarily stop you from adapting into that particular culture you want to enter. Language in itself, the strategies in itself, finding those local yellow pages so you can actually get those listed and actually really get substantial results. So these are some of the framework that I'm sharing you guys that we've done. And chances are, if you have at the very least tap into that, even if you're not running actual campaigns yet, and you chose to run a campaign later down the line, it would substantially increase conversion results as well.
I
And
will dial up a bit
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to know how do you find out that actually, for example,
Yeah.
SEO
Yeah.
website is the best tools, is the best channels to reach your audience? Because I think that's part of the strategy, right?
So just going back again to the main framework, whenever you do an overall strategy, there's traditional, there's digital, right? And overall, when I create the strategy for global companies, what I do is I have this overall strategy, and then from there, it's basically in English, and it would be. The thing is, I mean, I'm just going back again. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch my thought here. The thing is that you would not necessarily be able to identify any results or any subsequent like response directly to that specific market unless you have actually really executed all of that already. So regardless of if you have done that, you can tweak it later to be able to find out this is the most responsive audience. So it's a lot of A/B testing in the way. But then again, it should not be that, okay, when we enter the market, our overall global strategy is that we will be present in digital, we would be present in PR and other traditional media. And then for maybe in Japan, when we enter Japan, we'll figure out maybe PR is better. No, it shouldn't be like that. Well, the best results that we've gotten is that you have that global strategy, you implement that to all markets, and then from there find out which one is the one that produces most result. Then you can understand, okay, you know what, this is better, this is working for us. Because local SEO, for instance, if you do it, then and you do it consistently, and you do it on the actual, like, rightful white hat SEO strategies, then it would yield result, even if it just takes a while for you to execute it. So it's not a matter of like picking and choosing. It's a matter of entering and testing. If you don't have any data, if you have previous data, then you can use that in your advantage, obviously. But ultimately, you cannot just assume automatically, especially if you're an outsider entering that market. So you're a
Yeah.
global decision maker and you don't know the market, so that's the way to go.
Got you. So
Um,
from those sharing, I just will sum up a bit again. We know that we should go to the market, to the audience directly, and then from there has shared. Actually, I think we have to get the right time, the right people, the right context, the right message, and the right channel to execute your
one more
campaign.
thing, Evelyn. I want to also tap into that. What we most people forget is even cultural patterns.
Mm.
Okay, imagine the way we negotiate in Asia is very different than what how the Americans negotiate. Understanding the different patterns of negotiation, and when I have a client come into the US trying to negotiate the Asian way with a client in the US, understanding that and educating them what works differently in US, and still appreciating their pattern, what they grew up understanding, that is also key.
Actually, this conversation is getting interesting, guys. So please wake up a bit.
I would just want
I
to
want
add to
to
do what
ask,
you
how do you
mentioned.
differentiate
Yeah.
that? How do you
Yeah.
find those different between those the way, for example, Asian people are negotiating versus maybe US people negotiating? How do you find the difference?
um, in Asian pattern of negotiation, I see that they never stop negotiating till they're at the settlement table.
Okay, I'm touched.
This
Okay.
is actually a common occurrence even on global companies. In our end, a lot of the marketing materials we produce, all of a sudden another like region would say that's too American, that's too European, blah blah blah. So it's so hard to reconcile that, right? And even like the point of closing. Is another factor that they'll be like, oh, automation. You guys implemented the global office of implemented automation, and we don't do that in this country for this reason. And so there's also obviously some stuff that you need to step back and allow them to do, for the culture to, like somehow take over
Yeah.
still, like what she mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And the most interesting thing is, when I have clients coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they're very vocal about their negotiation. I want this, I want this, I want this. But then when I'm working with the Chinese clientele or the Japanese clientele, they kill you with their silence. And then you're thinking, like, what's going on?
You
And then
have
the
to be the
Americans are
mind
thinking
reader.
that is he like say something, they'll kill you with their silence, and you just need to sit and relax and just when they're ready to speak, they speak.
Interesting. Then I think it's all about the expectation, right? You have to
Expectations.
understand the expectation.
Yeah.
Just like the story you tell about the husband and wife.
Yes.
Locating the wants and the don't wants, I think it's also important in terms of crafting this kind of marketing concept to different cultures. Maybe just to like relating it back to the cultures, maybe not want or don't want. If we are talking in a larger industry or in a larger things on top of like real estate, maybe we have to understood the do's and the don'ts, right? In terms of the culture, sometimes we only ask about the do's, but for the don'ts, we sometimes or often forget to ask that. What do you want to avoid? What do you want to be limited? Things like that. I think there's a nice sharing and insight about managing expectation. And I also catch from your sharing, um, that we have to understand how to make sure that we are on the same page as the audience, as the clients. Maybe you can share one or two tips how to make sure that you are on the same page with the client. What are you projecting? What are you crafting in your mind is actually transferring into the client's mind before you execute the whole campaign, for example. Do you have any tips to share
I
that?
think that depends on the genre of the clientele that we are also in. If we're talking about in terms of the cultural aspect, the local aspect, I'll just take an example of one of our clients, which is into the aviation sector. So they typically train students, the youth, apparently, to be on the ground staff or to be an air hostess or to be in the cabin crew, basically. The youth is a very soft market for anybody to kind of crack because they're very well versed with what's happening. So we kind of did a mix of campaign when it comes to targeting them. It was, of course, there was a social media campaign attached to that, but it also was attached to a little bit of a localization campaign that we actually dealt with. We one of the service providers who typically has our connects with the telecom operators globally, and we also have our own product, which is about an integrated data-centric SMSs, which segments data accordingly to the patterns that the consumers are using it. So mixing that up and targeting the youth, it gave the local connect, it gave the right amount of communication, and it in mere 3 months we basically scaled their revenue from a 7.5 plus to their overall sales figure. So that was having a full house in time in terms of their trainings. So I think that is one example which is very relevant to mixing up what the audience really wants to the right amount of mix of the marketing strategies that we would want to implement. Of course, that added on with a lot of local SEO presence, etc. But that is one thing that for me as an example was a high point. Along with that, I think if I take it a global perspective, as I mentioned earlier in my panel discussion, we also have a product which is around health, which is preventive healthcare, which is growing post the COVID era. So coming to that, where every country, as Samina also mentioned, every country has a perspective of what health should be, what they should eat, what they should do. So connecting with them, whether it is an American market, whether it is an Indonesian market, or somewhere in the Philippines, so it majorly shifts from the mindset of the users that we typically are having. So connecting with them in terms of their behavioral aspect, connecting with them at a local ground level, and giving the jargons and the kind of wording into of what is consumed is what is something which is more important, along with a great pictorial view that we kind of can create a social campaign around, because something that we view within that 10 seconds is what cracks us up as a consumer or as a clientele at the end of the day.
It's data and understanding the consumer that backs up everything to transfer that.
At the end of the day, yes.
Yeah. Maybe some words from Dia before the
Um,
Q&A session.
Yeah, I'd
Prepare your
like to
question.
add into that. In addition, one of the challenges that we have whenever we launch a campaign globally is that, as I mentioned earlier, the other parts of the world doesn't feel fully represented. Initially, that was one of the contentions that I've heard in different departments, especially the CEOs of the regional, regional representatives. So what we did is to actually play before we started any advertising campaigns. When we formulated the storyboards and whatnot. I had to sit through with a really long, painful meeting with each of the country heads. But on top of that, we identified common values that are shared globally. That it's not so difficult to translate to different cultures, right? Something like, for instance, hospitality, or for instance, just about having good manners or whatnot, if it's relevant to like what the brand is all about. So we do that. We create campaigns that's specific to common values, and then from there, for instance, when we incorporate the visual identity already, like the actual production of the advertisement, or the actual production of the campaign itself, we try to one of the strategies that we've used a lot of animation techniques, because it's not discriminatory in that sense, that everything feels represented at the moment. That's what we've used because it's easy to translate. But should we choose to actually have live like live action, individual, like people actually talking or like being represented in the ad, then we try to really include as diverse as possible, diverse set of people as possible. Because even if it's going to be played in India and then tomorrow it's going to be played in Japan, it's still going to be relevant, especially if it's under a thematic theme of a common value. So that's some of the things that we've produced in the past. I've written tons of script that is, normally it's a typical advertising formula, but then again, it's a lot easier to adapt. Even if you put a translation at the bottom in French and German or whatnot, it's still going to be relevant, and provided that it would also create. It's also representative of the very basic behavioral principles that we all get triggered of at the end of the day. So that common values, basic principles that of advertising, and at the same time, being diverse, right, would help you and get you a long way.
Thank you.
And
for that.
managing expectations,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like I always
I
remind the
think-
client.
I'm so sorry, I have to cut you short because we have to ask the audience for the Q&A. Maybe we'll open for 2 questions. Is that okay?
Do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Does anyone want to come and ask anything?
Nobody translating
Well, we-
anything to different content. Just kidding.
Okay.
Okay.
We could have a massive clanger here. That's recently in the UAE. I don't, anyone that's from Europe, the Mitsubishi, there's a brand of vehicle. The Mitsubishi in Europe is called a Shogun, 4x4. Over here, it's called a Pajero. If you understand Spanish, that is not a good word in Spanish. So there was a wonderful headline here. Somebody donates 100 Pajeros to Dubai police. All the Spanish speakers thought that was hilarious, but it's not a good thing. So you've got to be careful with how you translate stuff. So it doesn't always go well. But thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
That was great. Lost in translation. If you'd like to all stand for a photograph, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.